Welcome to the SPEAKPact podcast, where high-performing speakers and the producers who hire them merge to give you the insider secrets to the lucrative speaking industry. Antoniette Rose, your podcast host and celebrated speaker agent, unveils insider success strategies. Discover a nexus of thought leaders and bookers, maximizing your potential in each and every episode. Your ticket to ultimate speaking success begins right here. Catch the transformative insights waiting for you on the SPEAKPact podcast, hosted by the industry powerhouse herself, Antoniette Rose.
Welcome back to SpeakPact. We are thrilled that you've joined us today, and you are in for a treat. We have Tina Dietz with us. She is a vocal leadership expert and the founder of Twin Flames Studios, pioneers in voice-powered publishing. So what is voice-powered publishing? We are actually going to dive into that. And I'm super excited because there's so many different ways to utilize your voice. And when you do utilize that voice, you can maximize, right, the time that you spent, whether it's doing a podcast or having an appearance on a television show or a news station, or really talking on a stage. It's never one and done. And we're going to dive into that together with Tina. All right. So you have produced over 500 audiobooks. Wowza. You don't look 120 to me, but maybe you're well preserved.
There's a portrait in my closet that nobody can see. Yes. So,
Well, can I have that face cream or whatever it is? Okay. And then you do podcast to book projects. Really interested in learning a little bit more about that. You have won multiple awards, and some of your books have been bestsellers. So much. You've been recognized by Forbes, ABC, Chicago Tribune, all the good stuff. So we're going to dive in a little bit more about you as we go along. But first of all, I just want to say welcome to SpeakPact.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Tina, what put you on this path? What were you doing podcasts and you're like, gosh, I'm putting a lot of effort out there. Why don't I just make this a book? Well, what really brought you down this path?
Well, having been in audiobooks we're going into our 10th year, we've always been, I've always been a huge, obviously, fan of using one's voice. I grew up as a vocalist, as a performer in musical theater. I was a business coach for many years, and then, started Twin Flame Studios for the audiobook side, but we also were producing podcasts at the time. And I was a very, very early adopter into the podcasting world and produced, 36, 38 shows over the years. But I always found the frustration in the conversation specific to podcasting about, well, what can I get out of it? What more can I get out of it? What more could I get out of it? What is the ROI of podcasting? And as the podcasting industry has evolved and changed, because it is so young, I mean, audiobooks have been around for more than 100 years. Podcasts have really only been around for maybe 15.
Is that all? Seriously?
If we stretch it. Yeah,
wow.
It's not been that long. I mean, we had internet radio, but podcasting really only, came up with the internet, and internet really hasn't been with us that
It's a
long.
baby. I didn't realize it was that new.
Exactly. So it was this combination of being in the world of publishing and being in the world of voice, where I really started questioning with my colleagues, many of whom are, as you can imagine, book coaches, editors, publishers of different kinds. Why aren't we using podcast content for published books? Why aren't we using it as a body of work? It captures the authentic voices of people so beautifully. Why? And the answer I always got from these experienced folks in the industry was, it's too much data. It's too much information to manage and go through 50, 80, 100 episodes of content that is typically not like a book. It's non-sequential. Topics can vary all over the place, and books need organization. They need a narrative. It's easier, they told me, to start from scratch. Well, it might be easier, but it's certainly not less time consuming or expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have my partner, who is my husband, has been designing data structure for 30 years, and he's a programmer and a software engineer. And so we put our heads together and we're able to create a framework by which we're able to now organize this podcast data and be able to use it as the body of work for these beautiful world-class published books. And it's gone very, very well. We've just launched this over the last year, and 2026 is looking really, really great for our next cohort of authors.
It makes a lot of sense, Tina. And so let me ask you this. There's a lot of speakers and corporate trainers who listen to the SpeakPact podcast who are guests on other people's podcasts, but they don't necessarily have their own. Can this principle also work for podcasters as much as podcasters?
No, and here's why.
No.
Because we typically, as guests, speak on the same thing over and over again. And so there's really not enough content typically to pull a high quality book. We usually, with a podcast, we're looking for a minimum of 50 episodes. 80, 100, 120 is better to come up with a really excellent book. But if you are somebody who is guesting on a lot of shows, then in that case, what you should be doing is certainly making sure that you are reusing those episodes in different ways. And I'm sure that, the whole repurposing conversation has been said more than once. But the other thing that's important about that content is if you feed in the transcripts of what you say on multiple different shows, and you ask if you have the tools and the know-how to prompt, let's say, AI tools, the publicly available AI tools, which is not what we use, by the way, you might grab some insights in there that are valuable to help you spin different articles, to help you come up with new topics or piggyback topics off of what you've done. So if you've never done that, if you've never analyzed your own voice through a third party like objective system, like a piece of software, it can be really, really insightful because it will tell you things about yourself that you didn't know. And that can be incredibly helpful. When we're working with a larger body of work like podcast content, we really are able to extract a full body of work out of it that, in addition to the book, then these authors can go off and then be more effective in their marketing, be more effective in their content development, and more strategic in how you are actually building your brand.
Well, I know that books are a great door opener, and they're often not great money makers. Maybe you have a different opinion on that. But I also, similarly, podcasts, being a podcaster, it's a lot of commitment. It's a lot of work to do that. I think that pretty much every speaker thinks about it, but do they really want to go to that trouble? Because podcasts are notoriously difficult to monetize. We're at the recording of this particular podcast. We're just under 2 years in. We've reached the top 10%, which is fabulous, but it's a passion project for us. This show is all about building relationships, getting our positioning out there, and giving back to the speaking and corporate training industry. But it's not necessarily going to, pay for itself even. So
Right.
Is your methodology a way to fund the podcast if somebody were thinking about starting their own? Or is it really just that position builder, that credibility builder still?
No, it definitely is an income stream. Whether or not it makes back the income that you put into it is the same situation as anything else in business, which is what's your marketing, what's your sales, what's your, your positioning, what are you putting into it, putting out of it. There's a lot of strategic decisions that need to be made. And if you are starting a podcast because you prefer to speak and you prefer to be in relationship, in conversation than writing, then it's a good venue, a good medium to work with. If you would really prefer to write, and it might not be the best thing for you to be doing, we're all encouraged to develop high quality content. That is something that we ring the bell on over and over and over again. But if you are a speaker and you're interested in developing your voice and your brand and your message and your platform around this, a particular set of content that it's valuable to develop relationships, and you really want to create some differentiation in terms of utilizing your voice in a certain way, the podcast could be really fantastic way to do that. The book is going to have you be able to build your platform in a way that you're probably going to do anyway. Most
Yep.
speakers end up writing a book. You hear it in the speaking industry all the time, right? You have to have a book. It makes you stand out. Or in the audiobook case, it's like not only do you need a book, now you need an audiobook. There's so many pieces that we have when we're building these complex and robust platforms. We're looking to make it better, at a better experience for folks who already have podcasts, and to be able to extract that value, but then also be able to more objectively see the body of work that you may not even have realized that you've created.
Which it seems like that could even lead into additional workshops you could do, additional talks you could offer, even programs you could offer. It seems like that's all synergistic, which leads beautifully into my next question. What is the synergy between podcasts and books? So let's talk about that.
Well, podcasting as long form audio is very different than other forms of media. So the average podcast listener listens for 40 minutes at a time. Other than that, when it comes to online media, we're kind of goldfish. We only listen or watch for a few seconds before we decide to move on to the next thing. In the case of social media in general, particularly short form video. And right now in our time, social media, it's really hard to move the needle when it comes to social media. And when it comes to podcasting, there's some issues with, okay, well, discoverability. But you've got to plant your flags somewhere in the space that you're going to go deep and you're going to develop a body of work that you can be proud of, that is, to one extent or another, evergreen. This is just, good business strategy in any platform building. So when we have a body of work as a platform, particularly if you have guests, when you go to create the book, you're opening up not only a new income stream, you're also creating a lot of crosstalk between those two things. So now you have a low hanging fruit but paid item to offer your podcast listeners. And then when if they find you through the book, so which is a whole other medium, finding you through a new way, then they're likely to come back and find out more about you through the podcast. So we want this flywheel that where people can find you and you can reinforce your own message and brand in a way that doesn't feel redundant, but feels enriching. And that's what's really important about the synergy between the two. The other thing that's really important when you're developing a book from content of a podcast is that if you have had guests on your show, and then hopefully you've stayed in touch a little bit with your guests, or at least you have some relationship with them, then when it comes time to launch the book, you have a built-in whole group of people who potentially can be some of your grassroots movement to get the book out into the world. And we've seen this now with a couple of the books that we've published, because they've already got fans in the case of the guests that they've had on their show and that relationship. So that becomes part of their launch team, that becomes part of their advocates, it becomes part of their kind of vanguard of getting that book out into the world. And that's one of my favorite things to have our authors experience in a launch party, is to have all of their guests come out of the woodwork to support these efforts.
We brought up several key strategies, key insights. One of the ones I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into is the fact that there is no silver bullet, right? It really is an ecosystem. I love that you brought that to the table, because I think that there's a lot of programs out there to buy, right? Create your perfect press kit, create your perfect TEDx talk, create your perfect book, create your perfect podcast pitch, right? Whatever it might be, create your perfect podcast. All of it is it works together. If you feel like you're going to do one of those things and actually make it big in the speaking or corporate training industry, you're leaving a lot of money and a lot of opportunities on the table. So I love that you brought that up. And a book is part of a bigger ecosystem, and producing a podcast is the same way. But if you can make one serve the other, and you're kind of maximizing the results of your efforts, that's brilliant, right? So thank you for bringing that to the table. Any more insights regarding that?
Oh, I'm sure I could go on and on about that, but I think that also depending on what market you're in and what industry you're in, the derivative products off of the book are also important. We typically see authors find it easier to create coursework off of book content than to necessarily create it natively, unless you have a background in curriculum development. Some books are very natural to it. And if you're doing training work or corporate training work, you've already got curriculum. But if you don't, then having the book to piggyback off of to create curriculum makes a lot of sense. And we've seen this in a couple of cases in the wellness space with a book called Uncomplicating Wellness, and then a book called Helping the Helpers, which was actually a category creator. The show has over 200 episodes. It's co-hosted by 3 hosts. One is a retired fire lieutenant, 2 are mental health professionals in the first responder space. And they had all of this beautiful content from first responders, leadership in the first responder space, not just, veterans, but EMTs and police and fire and animal control and all these areas of first responders that I wasn't even familiar with. And the book we decided to create from their content, we could have gone several different directions, but the impact they wanted to make was to save more lives of first responders, because the suicide rate of first responders is through the roof. And so we ended up creating the first guide for mental health professionals to be able to support first responders. And from there, the nonprofit that they had started, they're now writing grants to create and offer on a scholarship basis programs for continuing education for mental health professionals, for chaplains, and for leaders in the first responder space to be able to better support these men and women on the front lines. So they're continuing to put this out into the world, but the book gave them the push and the momentum as well as a structure to be able to do the rest of these things.
Yeah, excellent case study on just real life utilization of this. So what I love about what you said as well is a book and a podcast, especially if it's an audiobook or a digital book, you can kind of adjust with as you're collecting data from your audience. But what are people leaning into? What are they not seeming so interested in? What is the new problem that's developed in whatever space that you're an expert in? You can add to or subtract or even fully write those specific areas. Whereas if you create a whole course, and that takes a ton of work when it comes to curriculum, and then there's your videotaping your different segments a lot of times, or if you're delivering it live, it is a little bit more difficult to go in without dismantling the whole thing and try to insert some different directions. So I think that a lot of times speakers and corporate trainers, they know their material so much, they just think, I'm going to build it and they will come. I'm going to build it and everybody will love it. Well, you don't really gain that interactive feedback unless you're actually on podcasts or on stages, or even, maybe even handing out sections of your books. That's where you really get that feedback that's so valuable before you create that more static piece of work. So this whole system that you've put together is really, really interesting. You said that you should be, so if you produce your own podcast, you should be 80 to 120 episodes in. Producer, I'm not sure how far we're in, but we're pretty far down the road. In 2 years, we've created.
Well, at least 50. We like to have at least 50 to work with. 80 to 120 is more ideal, but 50 is kind of the minimum we want to work with to be able to create a book that is 30 to 40,000 words that is really valuable. We want these books to be the ones that people keep with them. They don't just sit on a shelf. People finish them. And then people go back to them. People give them to each other. We're not talking about a big old doorstop kind of framework book where it's like, these are the steps to follow for figuring this out. Yeah. These are highly relational, very reflective, very relationship building style books. And as the market continues to evolve in books, these are the types of books that people tend to finish more. Books like Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, or The War of Art, or The Four Agreements, or all of these are, relatively shorter books. Magic's a little longer, but they're highly conversational. They're very reflective. They're not as prescriptive. They're very opinionated, but that's different. And so we like these books because they make us feel like we're in relationship with the author. And that type of differentiation is something we're all looking for. We're looking to be the treasured voice in somebody's ear. And that makes people think about us. So that's the other part of the magic of these books and what they're designed to do.
Right. People buy what they know, like, and trust. And when you are on podcasts and when you are writing a book, you're getting your body of work out there. People get to know you on a deeper level before they even meet you. And they certainly are more likely to attract decision makers to get you the speaking engagement, whatever that might be. Another thing that you had said earlier is plant your flag where you're going to go deep. That is so important. I think that a lot of speakers think that they need to have 5 or 10 different talks. Really, in my world, I'd love to hear what your insights are on this, but in what I say is that you have one core body of work. You have one core big promise, right? In your talks, in your books, in your podcast interviews, whatever that is, people know if they want the solution or answer or even inspiration for ABC, you're the one to go to for that. Now, when you're adjusting that for different audiences, for different scenarios, for different emphases, you can do that through the stories that you share, through the case studies that you share, through the way that you deliver the content, but you're never too far off of that foundational work that you're known to be an expert in. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's a funny thing, and I think it's a really challenging thing. I was a business coach for many years, and I had the hardest time niching down, as they would say.
Leashing
And
down.
yeah, and I struggled with it. I was very, very good at what I did, and ended up working with more than 30 industries in 8 countries. But it was always so hard for me to say, oh, well, this is the main thing that I do, because I knew there were so many different ways that I could help people. And when I got into audiobooks, it was a relief, because it was a very clear mandate that we were creating mostly nonfiction audiobooks, and we were creating a space where authors could narrate their own audiobooks from anywhere in the world remotely, but fully supported. And we were the only people doing it. And we're still one of the only few studios that actually do this. And we do it better than anybody else in the world. And so be able to get down into a niche that deep and that narrow was a major, major relief to be able to say that. But it really takes something to stand your ground and say, this is what I stand for. This is our primary thing. And even as we've expanded out into now the Podcraft and podcast to book, we had like, well, what's our umbrella now that we are a multi-studio company? And it's still, although, all about how do we create leaders worth listening to? That's really our core thing. Who are the leaders worth listening to? What is their message? What does that sound like? And how can we support them in getting those messages out there? So that's always what we come back to. It's like, like we create these, audiobooks that move people, and we create books from podcast content that open doors. And it's not easy to kind of like, this is the space that I'm taking up, because I'm a multi-hyphenate. Like, I'm off doing improv and storytelling and crafting and all of these other things. And I love business development, and I love developing communities. And I have all of this, work that I want to do around voice and belonging. But those are all peripheral to the main business that I have. And even now, after many, many years of being in business most of my life, I still find it challenging to keep coming back to that, and keep coming back to that central core of what are you known for? because as a creative person, it can be hard not to get bored with your own message. And so as an author, as a podcaster, one of the reasons that we've done this the way that and set it up the way that we have is because you might find great joy in doing a podcast, but then the thought of sitting down and writing a book might feel like an absolute slog. And as particularly if you are somebody who tends to be more vocal and more relational, instead of sitting down and doing computer or even trying to speak something out in some kind of logical order can be really challenging. So again, this is why we create things that we need. And I know that I've always wanted something like this that would help me define my own body of work so that I could, not be trapped in the jar that I'm in and I could see the outside of the jar.
I love that. Okay, so do you have to, when creating a nonfiction audiobook, do you have to have a written book? Like, let's say you have all of that number of podcasts behind you.
Mhm.
Does an audiobook have to come from a written book? I guess is my question.
The way the industry is set up right now, 99% of the time, yes. And it's as much for a logistical reasons as it is and industry reasons as anything else, because books are created very differently than podcasts. Now, if somebody is starting out a podcast or even starting a new season, can you design your podcast with a more editorial bent? That can you create a book spine, a book brief, and then design the podcast to be able to fill in the content for that book? Yes, that is a way that we can do that for sure. It is basically just reverse engineering that whole process. Where podcasters tend to get tripped up in that arena is in finding the right people to help them, if it's a guest-based podcast, talk about those topics in a way that is actually going to serve the book. And that's one of the reasons why like multiple episodes of a podcast might go into the same episode and why we need a number of episodes to go into it. The other thing that becomes challenging in that arena is that sometimes the host will get stiff around the topic and not have the authenticity that we typically might have if we are allowing ourselves to just be present in a conversation and be excited and interested to talk about a specific topic. To have to be that structured for some people can be really challenging. So there's just pros and cons to think about, and think about your personality and the way that you love to work and the resources that you have available, and see how you want to actually build your authority, your ecosystem, and then of course the other part of that trifecta is, what does your audience want?
Right. So that actually leads me to my just internal question that I didn't verbalize. So on my podcast on SpeakPact, I am highlighting other people's insights.
Mm-hmm.
When I am on other people's podcasts, they are highlighting my insights. So if I were to create a book based on my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a blend of my insights, but really kind of heavy on other people's insights. How do you, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with that. How do you bridge
Well,
that?
sometimes we do bring in other episodes and things like that from other shows. There's no reason not to do that, particularly if you are speaking consistently on certain topics and the book is going to be related to those topics, which of course we're assuming it is. So bringing in episodes from when you are a guest on other people's shows is absolutely part of the process, based on the goals that the author or the podcast host has for the book. And it also depends on the style of the podcast. So if you are, there is a lot of value in being a convener, the type of thought leadership where somebody is like yourself, a convener of experts and a curator of content and interesting things. So one of the things our hosts tend to find out is that they've said more than they thought they did on the shows that they were in. And there's actually more of your voice and your opinion in your shows, in your episodes, than you originally thought. But you're absolutely right. Bringing in those other episodes on topics that you've spoken on other shows can be a really important way to add to that content and help create a framework that is consistent with your brand and where you position yourself in an industry.
Okay. Okay. So I know by this time in the show, there are some people out there who want to know, who is Tina Dietz and how do I get a hold of her? So, how do you like to be found, Tina?
The main way you can find us is through my website, twinflamesstudios.com. And you can contact us through the just the contact us page. You can find out more about audiobooks and Podcraft. And you can also, if you are interested in being an author and you're not sure where to start or what to do, we have through 2025, and we are going to be doing this ongoingly through 2026. We have monthly webinars that are panels of experts on different topics in the publishing world. And they're all free, they're all on demand, and you can find those on our live events page. So you can access any of those on demand or join us for upcoming panels and really pick and choose the topics that are interesting to you, because you get a lot of different voices and different resources. We also have a list, a directory on our website of vetted publishing resources for authors and publishing professionals as well.
Fun, fun. I probably need to check that out myself because, as you said earlier, as you alluded to earlier, yes, I have been working on a book for far too long, and I just need to get it out there, right? So I'll be checking out some of that as well.
Not easy.
All right. Say that.
It's not easy.
Well, with all the other things in your life, right? And and
Right?
and then something happens in your business, and you're like, huh, that kind of changes that chapter a little bit, or maybe I should add this component. And it could be just this perpetual project that you're working on. So I love your approach, and I also love your let's just get it done attitude.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing those insights with us. Tina, I know that you know my show, and you know that my signature question at the end has to do with more of a challenge than a question, because I want this show, the SpeakPact show, to be something that spurs action. And you don't just listen to some really great advice and some seasoned insights, but you actually you implement them so that they can make a difference in your own career and your own life. What is that one thing that you would say to the SpeakPact audience, that on this universal pact to make the greatest impact with the power of our voices, if they just implement today, they will see this time next year a huge leap forward towards the goals that they have, with regards to getting their solution out there in a bigger, broader, greater way?
Mm. One of my favorite sayings, I think I alluded to it earlier, was someone named Hugh McLeod. And he said, "You can't see the label of the jar you're in." And as people out in the world building a platform, we very rarely take the time to reflect deeply back on our own work in an objective way and get objective feedback.
Mm.
And so I would challenge anyone who has been out there for a while to gather their transcripts or videos together and to create not just a chat, but a project using something like Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini, and to ask that platform, who is, and say your name. So I would say, who is Tina Dietz? And be open to what you receive back. And then ask it to go out onto the internet and say, okay, go out on the internet, and now knowing all of this, who is? And then start to query your own work for the gold that is inside it that I promise you haven't seen yet. Because you will gain insights about your strengths, your uniqueness, your challenges that it's hard to get from your friends, your family, your colleagues, or even from your own insights. So to have a bit more of an objective feedback from a weird LLM thought partner, really can provide an interesting view. And be open and curious about what then would be the next steps for you in your career cycle, from, again, this completely objective point of view. So I would recommend, if you haven't tried it, it's really, really helpful to get a completely different set of insight and to start working with the body of work that you have that might be, you don't even know yet you have.
Yeah, I'm going to try that again. So it's AI comes a long way every single week, right? So when I did it, um, you have a sense of humor because you will definitely glean insights, but it will also fill in some blanks that may or may not be correct. I work with a lot of doctors, so it made me a doctor. I'm a doctor. I didn't even know it. And it made me some other things. But what was interesting to me is it made the connection. I work with doctors. So that's a good insight to me. If the
Mm-hmm.
AI sees that, then that's probably a strong market for me. Right. And so, and then they got a lot right as well. I really love that challenge. I think we should all do it pretty regularly because sometimes there's stuff out there on the internet that we don't know is there and maybe might
Very
not be
true.
representing us correctly. We could clean that up.
Yeah. I asked it the other day, what's the soundtrack of my 2025 based on all of the conversations I've had with it this year? It was so weirdly insightful. I ended up being moved to tears and
Oh
also
gosh. Okay,
thoroughly
so you ask
inspired.
it,
Yeah.
this is the script. What is my soundtrack for
Yes. What would you say
whatever?
my soundtrack was for 2025?
And
And
was
it
that
was
on Gemini or what did you use
I
for
was
that
I
one?
have the paid I that was on the paid version of ChatGPT because that was mostly what we used in 2025.
Mhm.
And we had quite a few things in there, and it was really interesting to see what it came up with, and I asked it to justify its answers. That's
Ooh, I'm gonna
the
try
other
that.
piece. Yeah, it was quite interesting because now chat can read across projects and tasks. So I was quite fascinated to see what
How
it had
fun. This
there.
is a fun challenge. I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try some of those things. Thank you for the challenge, but also thank you for your time. You've devoted years into creating, into discovering these insights and doing trying something that doesn't work and then redefining and trying again. And you packaged that all up and shared it with us, and we don't hold that lightly. So thank you for bringing your insights to us, Tina.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And for the SpeakPact family, be sure to look Tina Dietz up. I know she's on LinkedIn. She gave you the websites. We'll make sure that those are in the show notes as well. And ciao for now.
Thank you for listening to the SpeakPact podcast. To become a recommended speaker of Antoniette's WPC speaker agency, or you are a host or planner looking for a dynamic expert in optimized performance, Antoniette would like to personally meet with you. Secure a time with her at speakerbooker.com. Again, that is speakerbooker.com. It all begins with a vision, a voice, and a pact to impact. Join the SpeakPact movement by joining our new private Facebook group at the link in our show notes. Find us on nearly every social media platform at One Antoniette. That's number 1, ANTONIETTE, or simply #SpeakPact.